Hello the internet, my name is Dean and welcome back to part 2 in the action cable tutorial series. Now today we're going to be setting up the action cable portion of the series, but we're also going to fix a bit of the styling that I kind of missed in the first episode. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Now the first thing we're going to want to do when we come into our application is make sure that we're signed out. So if you're signed in, just go to your nav bar and sign out. And we want to fix this so that if we try to send a message, like let's say hello here, right now it just rejects the message with a 401 unauthorized, but what I'd like to do is say instead maybe don't show the form to send the message if you're not signed in. So to fix that, all we really have to do is come into the app views and the pages and the home.html, and we can wrap this entire form in a if statement that says if current underscore user, then we're good to go, don't do anything else. But if the current user is not signed in, then what we want to do is say, let's do a p tag. You need to be linked to, and then link to signed in, and then we'll say new user session path in order to chat. Now we can refresh the page. That's looking good, but let's maybe do some styling here. So we'll just say text, align, and center so that it kind of pops a bit more. And that's pretty much all we'll do for this. I'll leave the rest up to you guys. The second thing is, after you actually sign in, it'd be nice if these alerts looked a little bit better. So for this, we can actually come into the layouts and the alerts.html.erb. And if you come over to the Bootstrap documentation, and the alerts page, you can actually see quite a few examples here. So for each of these, I'll full screen this. For each of these, they have an alert class, and then they also have an alert hyphen, and then a keyword, and that word assigns a color. So here, like success is the third one, and that's green. Danger is the fourth one, etc. If you scroll down, you can find examples that have links, and you can also find some expanded examples here that are bigger alerts. But the ones we're after are the, where are they? The dismissible ones. I think I actually have to refresh the page. Yeah. So this one right here has this X that you can click to dismiss the alert, and that's kind of the one we want. So let's just grab that whole thing, and we'll paste it into this alerts.html.erb. And I do have a bit of a reference here, so I'm going to be looking at that occasionally to make sure that I'm doing everything correctly. So the first thing we want to do is say, we want to iterate over each of the flash messages. So we'll say flash.eachDo. Then we want to have a key and a value. And then we need to come down here and make sure we're ending this before we do anything else. We can then tab this over to make sure everything looks okay. And then instead of this alert-warning, which remember we can use to change the color, we want this to be an alert dash and then the key. Now, by default, it's going to be passing in either a notice or a alert. So we are going to have to override the classes because we don't have a notice or an alert in here. We only have the ones that Bootstrap provides us. So what we'll do is we'll end up pairing this notice class to the success, which is this green one, and the alert to the danger one, which is this red one. But for now, we'll just leave this alone. And instead of having holy guacamole here, maybe we should do the value that we're setting up here. So it's going to pass us a key, which is either a notice in the case of signed in successfully, or an alert in the case of like destroying a user or a message. And then it's going to pass in the value, which is just going to be the actual message itself. So here the value is the signed in successfully. And then we'll leave the button alone. So if we refresh the page and sign out, you'll see that the text hasn't changed yet because we need to actually override the classes. So for that, we come into Assets, Style Sheets, and the application.scss. And above our import statements, we're just going to extend the existing classes. So for this, we'll say .alert-alert because we need a class of alert-alert in the case that this key is alert, because then that's what this will get changed to. This will then be, if we're like deleting a user, this will then say alert-alert, and that's what we're trying to extend to. So we need to say alert-alert, and for that we'll just say @extend.alert-danger, and this danger, and we'll throw in a semicolon here before I change or do anything. This danger is this one right here. So we're extending it so that it'll get this styling, and then we also want to do a .alert-notice, notice. And for this we want to @extend.alert-success. So if we refresh, we can actually close this, and then we'll sign in. And then we'll sign in. Hello. Okay. You'll then see that the style changes, and we can dismiss this alert, and that looks just a lot better. The last thing I want to change is the time zones, because right now if I send a message, hello window 1, this is telling me it is 8:26 a.m., but it's actually 4:26 right now. Let me just see what time is it. So for me, it's telling me that it is 4:26 and Sunday, June 24th, 2018. So we want to change that, and the way to do that is to come into config and application.rb, and inside of the class application, we just want to say config.time_zone equals, and then Eastern time space US ampersand Canada. Oops, that's not Canada. And then we also want to say config.active_record.default_time_zone equals UTC. And you can also do or local, but you generally want to keep this UTC. And if you want to see all the time zones, I think you can do Rails. Okay, so you can also do Rails time:zones:all if you want to see a list of all of the time zones that you have available here that you can then pop into this section right here. So now that that's done, we can actually start with the action cable portion of this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and close some of this so that everything is a bit more readable. So for this, we can come to our terminal and we'll run a Rails G channel and chat command. So we're running a different generator here than scaffold or model or controller. We're generating a chat here, or a chat channel, sorry. So we'll run that, and it'll give us 2 files that we can use. The first one we're going to do is, I think Spring is running again. Let me just kill this and restart things. cd/mntd sites YouTube chatter. Okay. So now if I do a Rails G channel, oh well, let me stop Spring stop just in case. Rails G channel chat. I'm trying to leave these little errors in so that you can see, in case you run into the same problems, how I fix this. So for this, it'll generate the app channels chat channel and the app assets JavaScript channels chat.coffee, which is a mouthful. But we're going to start off in this chat channel.rb, and that is located in app channels and chat channel.rb. For this, all we want to say is stream_from, and just chat. Once that's done, we can come into our config, environments, and development.rb. And for this, we want to do config.action_cable.mount_path. And we'll just set this equal to /cable. Now, there's a couple tutorials out there that all use different strategies for this. I think there's one that'll set the mount path in your routes.rb. That's also perfectly fine, but because we're setting it up this way, let me just put a space there. Because we're setting it up this way, we actually need to come into our views, layouts, application.html.erb, and we need to set an action_cable_meta_tag. And we're going to be using that in our JS, so assets, JavaScripts, cable.js. And in here, we're going to use some jQuery, and we're just going to grab the meta, the name equal to action cable URL. And then we'll come outside of this first set of parentheses, and we'll just say .attr and content. So you can see we're just doing this, and we're calling this on this entire block here. We're calling the content attribute. So once we have that, we can actually close out of a lot of this stuff because we're pretty much done with all of that. The next thing we want to do is come into our models and our message.rb, and then we can say after underscore create underscore commit and message broadcast job dot perform underscore later and self. So we want to actually generate this message broadcast job because we don't have that right now. I know this seems a bit like magic, but really all we're doing is calling an after create commit and then calling this message broadcast job, which we don't have. So for this, we need to run a Rails g job, and we'll say message broadcast, which will then generate the message broadcast job test and the actual message broadcast job. So let's come into our jobs folder and our message broadcast job, and let's mess around with this a bit. So to start, we can leave the queue as default. That's fine. Let's change the def perform to get rid of this args, and instead we'll just say message. We can then, inside of this, do an action cable call to the server and broadcast method. We'll broadcast to the chat channel, which, if you'll remember from our channels.rb, we're actually streaming from the chat channel. So we're broadcasting to a channel that we're streaming to, and then inside of that we just want to say message, and we want to render the message. So we don't have this render message method yet, so let's go ahead and create that. And for that, we're just going to create a private method down here called render underscore message, and we're passing in the message, which is exactly what we have up here. And for this, all we want to do is say messages controller.render, and we want to render a partial. And for this, we'll obviously use the message partial, which we have in our views messages folder right here. So that's just the partial that renders the actual message. So that's where this is happening. And the locals, we just want to say message : message. So we're rendering the message partial, and we're passing in a local message, which is this message. And this should be familiar from our page's home controller, or home view, where we render each message and we pass in a local with the message itself. So all of that should be pretty familiar. It's just a different location where we're doing it in a slightly different setup. The next thing we want to do is the long part of this and kind of the key part of this. We want to go into our assets, JavaScripts, channels folder, and our chat.coffee. And if you're not familiar with coffee, that's fine. We can actually switch this over to .js. And we now need to convert this coffee into JS, and we can do that by just searching for JS to coffee, which will take us to this js2.coffee website, which is incredibly useful, where you can just paste in one and it'll spit out the other. So here we can just copy this JS that's generated for us, and we have essentially the same functionality just as a JavaScript instead of a CoffeeScript file. So here we're creating an app.chat. We're assigning it the app.cable.subscriptions.create. So we're assigning a subscription for the chat channel, and we have access to connected, disconnected, and received functions. Now there are a couple others that we'll cover in future tutorials, but for now we're just going to cover the ones that it provides us by default. So the connected is fairly self-explanatory. When we connect to the action cable server, this will be called. So for example, we can do a console.log, or we can even just start with an alert and say, hey, this ran. So if we do that, and we start the server, which is always a key component of this, and we refresh the page, you'll see that the server is successfully upgrading to the WebSocket, the chat channel is transmitting, and our alert is running. So if we want to do this a bit more in the background so we don't run into an alert every time we load this page, we can instead say console.log and connected to the chat channel. And if we refresh the page and hit F12, you can see that in our console, every time we connect to the chat channel, it tells us that we connected to the chat channel. Now we can do something similar for the disconnected method. We'll just say console.log and disconnected. Disconnected from the chat channel, which will, I guess, log to the console whenever we are disconnected from this channel, obviously. Now, of course, you will not see this in, let's say, a new tab and localhost port 3000. This user will not broadcast that they connected to the channel to the other user. For that, you would want something like an appearances channel, which we'll be setting up in a future tutorial. For now, we just want to I just kind of want to show you that you can do some initial setup in the connected and disconnected functions if you so desire. But the real key here is we want to be able to send stuff whenever we receive something from the server, we want to do stuff. So before, we send to the server and the server calls back and says, hey, do this create.js.erb nonsense. So we want to do something similar here and say, when we send a message, the server should send back something that says, hey, you need to put this on the screen. So whenever a message is sent to the server, the user is notified that there's a message that it needs to do stuff with. And for this, let me just save this messages.erb and close that, and we'll close this job. For this, what we want to do is we want to start by saying var messages, and we want to set this equal to, and we want to grab our chat box that we created in part 1. We then want to say messages.append, and we want to append the data, which we're passing in right here from the function. So this is the parameter right here. And we want to do the message from the data. The final step here is to say messages.scroll top, and we want to scroll based on the messages and the 0th element and the scroll height of that 0th element. So now let's refresh the page. We're still connecting to the channel, so we didn't mess anything crucial up here. Let's try to say hello world. And up here you can see that the message broadcast job runs, that it's running perfectly fine in the background. And we're sending the div right here we're sending the partial, and it's being transmitted and it's rendering on the screen. It's just rendering twice because in our create.js.erb file, we're also doing this. So if we refresh this page, you'll only actually see one hello world because there's only one in the database. We're just showing it twice. Now we can pretty much eliminate this by commenting that out and running the message again. So instead of that, let's maybe just say chat box. So instead of chat box, let's do message underscore body and .val, and let's set the val to be blank. So whenever we create a message, this gets reset. So let's test this out. We'll say hello. That gets reset. The message gets sent once, and the form clears itself. So now let's open up a second window. We'll come to localhost port 3000. We'll sign in to a new account, or I guess we'll sign up for a new account. We'll say test@case.com with the password of password. We'll sign up. We have our alerts right there, and we can just say, hey. And it's broadcasting to both perfectly fine. And we are running a basic action cable server now with everything working the way it should work. How's it going? Now you can, of course, I guess one final thing we can do is make sure that when we load the page, we're not loading every message in the database. For that, we can just come into our controllers and our pages controller. And instead of saying message.all, let's just do message.last, and we'll do 5 just to test it off. So now we're only loading 5. I guess we could also do like the last 15 maybe. And we're pretty much done at this point with the basic chat room setup. So that about does it for now. The future tutorials will cover stuff like the appearances channel, so you can see how many users are online, possibly listing the users in like a username list or whatever. A tutorial on setting up Redis for your development server, as well as the production server. So the entire workflow for that, I'll cover setting it up in AWS as well as DigitalOcean. I'll cover the Nginx file that you need to get that to work, because that's kind of a key part that messes up a lot of people, is they're upgrading at the wrong times so that their WebSockets get messed up. And I'll also have hopefully an active storage tutorial, which will cover attachments like GIFs and images and stuff like that. And hopefully in a way that it doesn't force the page to refresh every time, but I'm still working through that. But for now, Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please remember to like it because that helps me. And if you didn't like this video, then remember to dislike it because that helps other people know not to watch it. If you're interested in the future tutorials covering the action cable stuff or the active storage stuff or anything else Rails related, then consider subscribing. But for now, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.
She's been looking for a reason, and I think she found it in my mind. So we're moving this colorful night, and we're staying away from the crowd and under the lights.